Good to have Sawyer out for the first time. We do have a card I'll put at the back from the Middlebrooks. And it says, to our family at River Ridge, thank you so much for your prayers, calls, texts, visits, and meals. You have made this transition into a family of 3 easier by far. We look forward to raising Sawyer around such caring and God-fearing Christians, Matt and Amy, the Middlebrooks. And so appreciate that, and we'll put that up. And it's good to see them as a family of the whole family out tonight. They've been taking turns coming out lately. Okay, Ecclesiastes, the 6th chapter. Now, you might be thinking, oh no, we only have 12 verses to cover tonight. It'll be done in 5 minutes. Well, if you've done the question sheet, emailed out, lot of stuff to discuss in this particular chapter. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to read the first 6 verses tonight, the first 6. Let's just let Nicole, that whole pew there, just cover the first 6 verses. 2 verses apiece. If you'll go ahead, Nicole, and start.
There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is prevalent among men, a man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor, so that his soul lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God has not empowered him to eat from them, for a foreigner enjoys them. This is vanity and a severe affliction.
If a man begets 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with goodness, or indeed he has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better than he, for it comes in vanity and departs in darkness, and its name is covered with darkness.
Though it has not seen the sun or known anything, this has more rest than that man. Even if he lives 1,000 years twice, but has not seen goodness, do not all go to one place.
All right. Now, again, we're going to find a lot of repetition throughout this book from chapter to chapter. Some new things that we're going to be discussing. And again, I'll just reiterate, because we do want to make sure that we get proper application of this. Is it right for us today, here we are, we're under the new law, going back and looking at Ecclesiastes, is this something that applies to us today? And if you say no, we're done. But if you say yes, I want to know why. What's the benefit of going through Ecclesiastes? Warren?
I think it indicates the nature of man, and you talked about it being timeless.
That's right. The nature of man, it's timeless. Man has not changed. That's the thing that we need to talk about. We need wisdom just as much today as they needed it back then. And although, what we're going to be learning from Solomon is a lot of the mistakes that he made and things that he learned. And as we often say, if we can't learn from others, we're in trouble. That's one of the great things that the scriptures were given for us. Let's learn from the mistakes of others. Let's learn from the successes of others. So often we don't learn from other people for the main reason is what? Why don't we learn from the mistakes of others? For the obvious reason? It won't happen to me. I'm not going to be like that. And that's just wrong thinking is what that is. Now it starts right out with a question we have on our sheet. And the first verse that Nicole brought to us is, there is an evil which I have seen under the sun. And her verse had the word prevalent. My one has the word common among men. Either way, I'm asking the question, why is the evil? Why is it common? Why is it prevalent? And I think within that we want to answer why it's not. Okay? Not only why is it that way, but we're going to answer, well, it's not because of this. And what might we assume, or no, it's not to assume. We know it's not because of what? What's an obvious thing? Because of our previous study. Evil is prevalent not because evil is everywhere, evil is common, but it's not because
We inherit.
Thank you, Mallory. You came through in the crunch, okay? It's not because we are born in sin, that we've inherited it. You hear it so often. You go to the book of Ephesians. Let's go over to Ephesians quickly. Ephesians, the 2nd chapter, and I guess we're over to Christopher. Christopher, if you'll read the first 3 verses of Ephesians chapter 2.
And you he made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience, among whom also we all once conducted ourselves in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, just as the others.
Okay, and so this is where this whole idea, we talk about the fact that we walk, once walked according to the course of this world. Well, why did we do that? Why did we walk in the course of this world? And then it talked about that we were by nature children of wrath. Why were we like that? And this particular passage is talking about more of habit forming. If somebody were to come up and just get into a discussion with you, and now we're going to get back to our original question, not talk about the negative but the positive. What's the obvious answer why it is so prevalent, or why is it common? Why? What's the answer? Because people want to know. I mean, that's why Calvinists, John Calvin and Augustine and others before him said, well, here's my answer for this. My answer is that we can't help but sin. We have to sin. Is that true? You have to sin? There's a lot of people think you have to sin. Tim?
Man chooses to sin.
Man chooses to sin. Remember, when we're talking about the temptations that we face today from James chapter 1, you are tempted to sin, but nobody makes you sin. Nikki?
The concept of having to sin just goes totally against the nature of everything you see about God in the Bible, because it talks about him being a God of love and a God of justice and a fair God and a gracious God. And so for him to tell me you're going to go to hell if you sin and it separates me from you, but you have to and you can't not sin,
Right.
would just make him an incredibly unfair and unloving God for us to be forced to be separated from him against our will.
Right. And it's just, the obvious answer is it is unbiblical. There is no biblical support for that concept. Okay, so what is the answer? What is why is evil common or prevalent? Why? And there's an obvious answer from Romans. Why is it everywhere? Why is it everywhere?
Romans 3:23.
Yes. What's it say?
Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
Yeah. The reason is because we all sin. Now, when people want to get back to this idea, well, but why? But why have we all sinned? And the obvious answer is, why do you sin? Why have I sinned? What's the answer? But why did we sin?
Desire.
What's that?
Desire.
Desire? Yeah, James 1. We gave into temptation. That's it. Let's not make it complicated. This is not hard. This is not rocket science. Anybody that sins, it's because they gave into a temptation. That's all. Now?
Well, I mean, it's easier to give into a temptation than to fight against it.
Sure.
It's easier to sit on your couch than get up and exercise. We're creatures who like to choose the easier path.
Sure.
So it's not that hard to think of why there's all this evil. It's because it's easy. It's easier to not do what's right.
That's exactly right. I mean, how easy is it to think the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, not do something we should do? I mean, it is extremely easy. Bernice.
Are you saying that we cannot sin at all? Like if you put your mind to it, you cannot sin at all?
No, now then I would be contradicting other passages of Scripture, right?
To me, it's like you sin. We sin without even thinking about it.
Yeah, that's how easy it is. Now, over in 1 John, Bernice, chapter 1, verses 8 through 10, he says, if you say you have no sin, you're a liar and the truth's not within you. The reason I brought this up is because people want to make excuses for sins. Now, if we have to sin, why is there punishment for it? What is the consequences of sin? There's another passage over here in Romans. What's the consequences of sin?
Death.
Death. The wages of sin is death, okay? So if there are consequences for sin, would you punish a child for something that they couldn't help but do? No, you would not punish your child, okay, if something that it was under their control. The reason you punish your child is because they've done something where they could have said no, okay? And so all we're saying, I didn't say I was sinless. Okay, don't misunderstand me, Bernice. But what we're saying is
No,
that
I wasn't saying that you were sinless. I'm saying like, just the way it sounds like if you really put your mind to it, you won't sin. You don't have to sin.
yeah. If you be like Jesus, you won't sin. But we're working towards that, right? As I go through life, I will sin what? I will sin less. So if you really put your mind to it, right? If you really put your mind to it, can you overcome? Can you resist? I've asked you this in class before. Has anybody here ever committed a sin that you've never done anymore or since? You know, you think about your past life. Man, I stopped doing that. You know, when I got married, I never did that anymore. Well, you overcome. So what we're saying is, any sin you can overcome is the point. There is no excuse for not overcoming a sin is the point. And that's why it's everywhere, as he's talking about. Now let's get into the specifics of what he was bringing up. Look what we have here in verse 2. A man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor. Has he given you any of that? I mean, what you have, has it come from God?
Yes.
Right, let's understand. Everything we have comes from the Lord, right? We've been blessed. We put it that way. It comes from the Lord. So he says, a man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor, so that he lacks nothing for himself of all he desires, yet God does not give him power to eat of it, but a foreigner consumes it. This is vanity, and it is an evil affliction. Now remember what Paul told the Thessalonians. I'll send them a strong delusion that they'll believe a lie. Does God want them to believe a lie? Why does he send them a strong delusion that they'll believe a lie?
Because they want to.
Because that's what they want. Now, if God gives you all these blessings and you cannot enjoy it, God doesn't let you enjoy it, whose fault is that?
Yours.
It is your fault, Nikki.
Kind of
It's not your fault, Nikki.
This might be kind of a weird devil's advocate kind of question, but you know, if we talk about the things that we have physically being blessings from God, does that mean that people who don't have that are not blessed by God? Because I know we all have the spiritual blessings in Christ, but if we say, you know, I have a nice house,
Right.
but somebody else has a nicer house, does that mean that God has blessed them more than me?
Right, and I'm glad you
And
brought that up
doesn't that show favoritism?
because it does bother me the way people use that. We just want people to understand that ultimately, if you have a job, yeah, you went out and beat the pavement, you got the education, you went to the interview, you answered the question. Do I tell God he gave me the job? Well, God gave us the world. He gave us everything in it. He gave us the ability to work. So ultimately, everything does come back to God. Whatever you've done, whatever you accomplish, we want to give God the glory. But remember that Jesus talked about, what did he mention about rain?
Falls on the just and the unjust.
Okay, so it falls on the just and the unjust. Now, what does that mean? What's that mean?
Good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people.
Yes, that's right. And so what we're talking about is that the rain just naturally falls. And so if somebody has a nice house like you're talking about, does that mean God approves of them? No. But could you ultimately say that, man, if it wasn't for God, you wouldn't be able to have anything? Remember, kind of like Jesus telling Pilate, you could do anything, nothing at all if it wasn't given to you. The ability to make choices and whatnot. So, yeah, this is why it's very important that you understand. We understand this because if you're successful in this world and people think if they're successful, God approves of them. As a matter of fact, some people think that if you're not successful, God is not approving of you. Can poor people make it to heaven? Can rich people make it to heaven? But it's hard, isn't it? There's danger that is there. And so, in this particular context, and getting back to what Nick was talking about, yeah, he was basically using the analogy here that if God has provided all this for people, because remember, he's talking about an attitude that has sucked the life out of these people, and their life has become vain or empty. Because here it is, you get everything you need. Look what he describes here. A man to whom God has given riches, wealth, and honor, so that he lacks nothing for himself of all he desires, yet God does not give him power to eat of it, but a foreigner consumes it. This is vanity and is an evil affliction. Why can't you enjoy what you have? Who wouldn't enjoy what they've been blessed with? Just what they have. Bernice?
So somebody who's never satisfied.
That's it. Anything else? Nancy?
They're always looking at what everybody else has and not accepting and enjoying what they have.
Okay. Anything else?
Someone who's afraid they're going to lose it, right?
More concerned about losing what they have than enjoying what they have. There are things, guys, and you guys have grown up with the saying, stop and smell the roses or the coffee sometimes. Some countries we say coffee. What's that mean? Why do we say that?
Appreciate what you have.
But yes, but why are we saying that? Because we're so busy, we don't take time to appreciate what we have. And I'm going to tell you, folks, that happens today. Our jobs, we get so busy, we're always on the go. And to really just stop and we sing about counting our blessings. Sometimes, well, Jack, I just don't have time to count my blessings. Really, my life is just in the fast lane. Well, I tell you what, this applies to you then. This applies to us. We need to be thankful for what we have, enjoy what we have, appreciate what we have, and give thanks for what we have. It's hard to do that when you're just constantly wanting more, not satisfied, not content. That's what we're up against today. Am I dreaming? Is this a problem today? Okay.
Well, I mean, we all have, well, not all smartphones, but we have ways to multitask. I mentioned that last week in the class on Wednesday night. You know, we can make ourselves as busy as we want and have no time for God at all. So it's a balance that we all have to have. The responsibility we have as a parent, a worker, brother, spouse, whatever. Right. We have to balance, all those things together and not lose sight of the goal.
I think it's true. I think it can fit in many facets of our lives. I think in love, young Sawyer there. You're thinking, well, I'm busy as a parent. I got to raise him. I got to do this. I got to do it. Well, just stop and be thankful for a child, right? Stop and be thankful for their accomplishments. Praise them rather than you're pushing and pushing your job, pushing and pushing. You got to do this. You got to do that. Can we just take a time out? Can we take a commercial? Can we just relax for a bit? And just have you ever heard the expression downtime? Downtime is usually used to appreciate what you have and have some contentment and have some joy. This particular section, this particular chapter, of course, because we're ultimately getting down to that idea where there's a cool verse here, we haven't read it yet, that we're going to get to in the second half of our study, where it's talking about rather than being content with what he has, he's longing for what he doesn't have. And so many people are just not happy because they're reaching for something that just isn't there. And back to that saying, a bird in hand is better than two in the bush, is really where that comes from. Okay, the next passage that we had read was, if a man begets 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his life are many, but his soul is not satisfied with goodness, or indeed he has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better than he. And of course, talking about that attitude, for it comes in vanity and departs in darkness, and its name is covered with darkness. Let's talk a little bit about that. One of the questions I had here, by mentioning many children and many years, what should that have done for man? What should that have done for him if he has many children and lives many years?
Satisfied his soul.
Should have satisfied him, shouldn't it? There should have been some joy in there and appreciation. That satisfaction that should be there. And the sad part is, he says, as he describes this person, that he's not satisfied with goodness. And hasn't even prepared, they talk about burials and, and just planning and just everything is empty. Everything is vanity. It's vain, empty. And there's got to be purpose to life. And I'm so surprised. Well, I shouldn't be surprised because it happens to us. We can lose sight of why we're here and not value what we have and lose our true goals of what we're trying to accomplish in this life. You guys were mentioning earlier about being so busy. Not only can you be so busy and not have joy, but you can be so busy and not doing other things that are profitable also. Any thoughts on what we're talking, Tim?
Well, last week we talked about Job, and then the reference to chapter 5 where both stated, naked I come and naked I will leave.
Right.
You think about the two extremes. Solomon had everything. Job had a lot of everything. I mean, he lost, all that. But you look at the two and you feel sad for one, and you think, well, Solomon had all this wisdom, but they both end up in the same place. I mean, they're, as far as they both are going to leave with nothing.
Right.
As far as hopefully, the heavenly home is hopefully what we want. But can't take it. So whether I'm content with what I have or want to downsize or upsize, whatever that is, I should be content with whatever it is and be able to find peace in that.
It's so true, because didn't we I think we were like in the second chapter talking about this, or the fourth chapter. We talked about, here's a person who works his whole life, and then he gets his retirement, and then he dies of a heart attack first day that he retires. We look, man, what a shame. But for the Christian, who does have his secular job and works his whole life and has a heart attack, it's a little different. It should be. Because up to his time, he's been applying the principles here and found, he's had joys. If I'm laying on my, honestly, if today, if I'm laying on my deathbed, I've enjoyed seeing the grandkids. I've enjoyed seeing the kids get married. I can sit and reflect. Hopefully I can just appreciate what I've had, that I didn't say, man, I blew it. I didn't appreciate what I had. That's going to be the difference, because we all could fall into that situation. Because I'm not saying if you're godly, you're not going to have a heart attack the day you retire. It could very well happen. But the difference is we have been applying these principles all our life and enjoying what we have that God has provided for us. It's just to me, it's so applicable to my life, our lives. Gene.
There's another good saying: do not put off for tomorrow what you can do today.
True.
A lot of people, when I retire, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and they don't make it.
It's true. I mean, even if we applied that principle to here, well, I'll enjoy things later. I'm really going to enjoy it later. And I'm going to tell you, and all the moms here with grown-up kids will tell you, go in and look at Sawyer when he's sleeping from time to time. You do that already, but I'm just saying, all the little things, enjoy them, because they grow up so fast. We'll all tell you that. They just grow. I mean, I can't believe the kids, now you have grandkids. It happens so fast. But as I look back, I can remember those times. You just don't say, I'll apply this stuff later. That's the problem. Solomon missed it. And then later on it sunk in like, man, that was all in vain. Nicole.
Well, I kind of wonder, if this man, he's fathered 100 children and he's lived a long life, but maybe this whole time he, never got his dream job. There was something that, he was missing from his life, something that he thought that he really wanted or he really needed, and that would have made things better, and he spent his whole life worrying about that and not about enjoying those blessings, as you said. I mean, I think about, in my life, most of my husband left and fell away from God, and I could spend my whole life just being well, I'm not married. I had that and it's gone now. But the truth is that there are so many blessings in where I am in life right now. And wherever you are, I mean, God has given you blessings and wealth and really wonderful things if you will see it. And you will appreciate it for what it is and not worry about this, whatever you want in the future or whatever you don't have right at that moment. And that's why this man wasn't satisfied in his life. And that's why we have such an advantage as Christians, because we can be.
I'm not following that. Somebody else says so. Nancy?
But wasn't it as he went through his life, he just started leaving God out of it.
Yeah.
Because he started, burning incense to other gods and lowercase and doing things that his wives wanted him to do. And he just totally forgot that, God was the one that did it all for him.
Well, it's like, again, how many times have we read in the book so far the phrase grasping for the wind? And Jake?
I'll say something about what Paul said.
All right.
You can't have the attitude. You can't feel the way she does if you're not following God. And that's basically.
Well, let's just get everybody crying, Gene. That'll work. But you're right. I mean, that's the key. That's what gets us through it. That's the problem here, right? The problem in this chapter, in this book, is here's the scenario when you take God out of the picture. Here's how you feel. Here's how you act. But when you put God in the picture, solves it.
At this point in Betty and I's life, you'd be surprised how many times and the two of us sitting there talking or whatnot. Boy, I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we did that.
Right.
Because the kids are gone, the grandkids are gone, and we're back to where we started.
Right.
And why didn't we save more money and have $10 million? That'd been nice to have $10 million, or $5 million, or $1 million. But what will we do with it now?
So you don't
We
talk
don't
about
feel
that.
like going,
Right.
So that means nothing, dude.
It does.
What you got,
It's true.
whether you, the important thing is God and the family, and that's what's important.
No, yeah, that's the key. Just bring God in there. It
Just
gives
say
you.
amen.
Gives you amen. Bernice.
I was just gonna say, sometimes things can seem like bad things are happening to you, but that bad thing could end up being a good thing. But you don't see it until it's over. You get through it, or.
I was sitting in the prison today. You'll meet Kevin when he gets out. Kevin Brooks. I like this guy. I love this guy. When a guy looks you in the eye, he got messed up with prescription for his back. But anyways, when a guy looks you and he says, the best thing that ever happened to me was being incarcerated and meeting Skip and learning the truth. See, bad situation, but when somebody says that's the best thing, it's the best thing, in your circumstances, because you found the Lord. You found the truth. And the guy's crying. I mean, he just gets all teary-eyed. He's just so thankful that he's found the truth and wants to do right. He says, I know there's a revolving door here, but Chuck, I said, I didn't do street drugs. I'm not coming back here. I'm not coming back. Because when you put God in your life, you have that purpose. Mal?
It reminds me of the passage where it says, better to go to the house of mourning. When everything's going well and you're not having to struggle through things, you may not be sinning, but you don't have any, everyone's healthy, you haven't lost a kid, you haven't lost a parent, you haven't lost anything, you start taking things for granted.
Yeah.
But then when something happens to you, it's not that you lost God, but you realize I was taking things for granted. You may never have realized you were. And I think that's part of the wisdom where he talks about, it's better for the guy who had the miscarriage, and it's because he realized the value of life, and he realized the value of, every moment is, that's all you're guaranteed is this current moment.
We're seeing so many of these stains that we're making are repeated in the New Testament. Even, didn't Jesus, when he talked about Judas, because of his betrayal, it had been better for him if he'd never been born. Now you think about your life. Would it have been better for you never to have been born? You might say, well, look at all the good things that I've done in my life. I've actually touched. Yeah, but if you're not faithful to God, it's better if you've never been born if you're not going to be faithful to the Lord. People, really? Yes. That's why it's important. And the very verse that Mallory's talking about is next week, chapter 7, verse 2. It's better. You're going to see all these betters next week. It's better to do this. It's better to do this. It's better to do this. And we're going to look at those. Now then he mentions in verse 5, though it has not seen the sun or known anything, this has more rest than that of man. Even if he lives 1,000 years twice, that's 2,000 years. but has not seen goodness. Do not all go to one place? Who lives that long and doesn't see goodness? Have you ever met anybody who only sees the negative? Have you been around those people that, I don't care, if it's a bright sunny day, what do they say?
It's hot here.
Okay? You know, and you finally get some rain and it's too much rain. The temperature, the summer, it's too chilly. There's no pleasing these people because they can't see the good. They can only see the negative. And you feel sorry for those people. And you just don't want to be around them a lot because they kind of pull you down. All right. Now, I want to get this because we got 11 minutes. 7 through 12, finish up the chapter. We're over to 10. And we're going to come up.
All the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the soul is not satisfied. For what more has the wise man than the fool? What does the poor man have who knows how to walk before the living?
Brian, verse 9.
Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and the striving after wind. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he.
For there are many words which increase futility. What then is the advantage to man? For who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime, during the few years of his futile life? He will spend them like a shadow. Or who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun?
Now you're talking about, he keeps putting an important question for me. Remember, throughout this chapter, Solomon often just talks, his position is the person without God in his life. And so when he talks about this idea of, can you really tell somebody what's going to happen to them? As far as because of the way they're living, the way they're acting. If God is out of their life, can you really tell them where they're headed? Can you? You've done it. But do they listen? No, you can get, if you remove God from the picture, listen, man, you're going down a slippery slope here. I'm telling you, you're heading down a bad path right now. But they don't see it. Oh, I'm fine. I'm okay. See, when you remove God out of the picture. But when we study these things, we understand, if a married man and you're saying, man, you're always over there with the ladies, you're always flirting with them all the time. That's a slippery slope. You need to stop doing that. Your wife's standing there and you're always complimenting these other ladies. That's just not good. The person has God in their life sees that. The person without God in his life says, you're overreacting. What are you talking about? You see, this is very important. We see why we're different. Yeah?
Well, even God warned Cain, and he didn't heed. He said, watch your, temptation's right there at your doorstep. And Cain just didn't even listen to God himself. So it's so of course people aren't going to listen to us when we tell them what God says.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to get people to see if Cain won't even see what
God's
God
there,
does.
why is your countenance falling? And it just went from worse to worse, didn't it? Because of his attitude. And this is the key for us, folks. So if we're going to study this whole book and we're going to walk away from this study basically saying, wow, I've learned I got to keep close to God. How do you do that? How does a person do that?
Pray.
You pray. How else?
Study.
You study. How else? You worship. How else?
Surround yourself with a Christian.
Okay. And how else? Warren?
We have to examine ourselves.
Examine ourselves continually. Absolutely. And I'm thinking, when you apply these principles, if you go through, can you do all the things you guys just told me and still be negative? Yeah, you could go through life and not appreciate what you have. And so we're talking about you can stay strong, you can draw near to God and He'll draw near to you. Yeah, you pray, you study, you worship, you're with other Christians, you examine yourself. But remember, the everyday things, we're talking about the nuts and bolts of the Christian life. We're talking about things that happen every day. People say, let's study stuff that I deal with when I'm at home and it's, early in the morning, one kid's throwing up and I got bills to pay and I got all these problems. Is there anything we can study that applies to this? Yes. Yes. This is everyday stuff. I don't know what you're doing tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen tonight. But you know what? Every one of us could say, my life is hectic. Couldn't you say that? Can anybody here not say that? Okay, see, the point is we can all relate to this. Now, he talked about this in verse 7. All the labor of man is for his mouth. Okay, obviously, you got to survive. And yet the soul is not satisfied. You know, if you're going to work and work and work, what are you working for? Well, to pay bills. What bills? Well, I got to pay the mortgage. Oh, so you have a home that you enjoy? Well, no, I'm too busy paying the mortgage. And so what else do you get money for? Well, so I can eat. So you're enjoying your food? No, I ain't going to enjoy the food because I'm working. You know, if you got these things that you're working for, do you even enjoy them? There's nothing wrong with this. But see what happens with the fool. For what more has the wise man than the fool? What does the poor man have? Who knows how to walk before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering desire. What is that? That's what I was talking about. What you actually see is the tangibles, rather than thinking about what you haven't seen. I want what I haven't seen yet. You're not content with that. Maybe that verse I need to apply to myself, where Debbie's saying, will you just stop on a channel? You know, well, there might be something better on the next channel. You know, just stick with it. You know, of course, when you just don't have cable, it's easy to go through 7 channels quick. But I don't know one thing is going to change that quick. But again, it's like, can you just be satisfied with what you have? Well, there might be something better. Could there? Maybe. But maybe not. So why don't you just look at what you have and appreciate that, Warren?
This isn't scriptural. How many have heard the expression about the grass is always greener?
That's it. That's exactly what we're talking about here, Warren. You're right. The grass is greener. Nikki?
It makes me think a lot about, I was 19 when Jesse and I got married, and he was 21, and we got a lot of comments from people like, wow, are you sure about this? Like, you haven't even met a lot of people yet. Like, there could be somebody else out there that you are better with and that you like better or is more attractive or whatever. And Jesse, bless him, ignored them all. But, it didn't matter because we were happy with what we had found in each other. There could have been somebody better out there, or, smarter, or, I know. Not that Jesse, but he could have done better.
The screaming, we'll delete that one.
Well, and the thing with greener grass on the other side, I mean, it needs to be mowed, which takes time, which will keep you away from the Lord.
Okay.
So, I mean, the thing is those things that we seek, that we're not happy, that we want more, a lot of times keeps us from God.
And it does. And I just didn't want to let that Nikki's comments go by, because it's so true. Because every one of us could say, could you have married somebody else? All you guys, could you have married somebody else? Well, sure. Yeah, but that's something that a waste of time to think about. We got what we have now, and we appreciate what we have. And I'm not going to spend time wasting time, but people waste time thinking about stuff. It doesn't profit anything. Bernice.
Have you ever heard the saying about, well, it's pertaining to married people, the 80-20 rule? You never? It's where your wife is 80, but you see something probably physical. It's the 20.
Oh, I see.
What was in a movie?
Because you're still in love. Okay. Yeah. But the point is, again, it's coming back to appreciating what we have, and our lives, as busy as they are, we can lose sight of this. And I love that saying. It's a bad saying, but wandering of desire. People are just not focused. They're just not focused. And I'm going to tell you something. You take your wife out for dinner, she's not enjoying the dinner when you just keep looking around. Look at her. Okay? Now, look what it says in verse 10. Whatever one is, he has been named already, for it is known that he is a man, and he cannot contend with him who is mightier than he. You know what? We only have 3 minutes left, and I'm going to not waste them, I'm going to use those just talking about that verse. The rest of it's pretty much self-explanatory. One of the biggest problems that man has today with God is what? One of the biggest problems they have with God.
They want to dispute with God. I don't understand why you want me to do this. So
Okay, yeah.
Reason why.
Yeah. I don't like his authority. And so I just don't like the idea of somebody being mightier than me. Right? I mean, that's just it. That's the problem that man has. He didn't want to even think about that. And that's what he brings up here. Solomon brings up in here. That with man, really has a hard time with one that is mightier than him. And if you accept the fact that he's mightier than you, you're going to have to swallow your pride. You're going to recognize his greatness. It's not all about you and what you think you can get out of this life. It's rather than appreciating God, his greatness, and just enjoy what is already there and appreciate it. This is the problem that we have in the world today. And I'm going to tell you, to sit back and say, that could never happen to me, yikes. It's a problem that's prevalent everywhere because we're influenced it around. And people even put thoughts in your heads at work about things that are beyond. You know, he's like, hey, let's go out to the bar. No, I'm going to go home. You know, I'm happy going home. No, you'll be happier if you come with us to the bar. No, I won't. Don't dangle a carrot of what might be better in front of me, and we'll lose sight of what we already have. And that's what's important to us as Christians, to persevere to the very end. Our time is gone. Powerful stuff. Next week, we will look at, Lord willing, read that chapter. I'll send the questions, but things that are better. And we'll go from there.
Here's a lesson.
No, right, 5 seconds a day.
You did the invitation? Well, I'm calling on you, so best be ready.
Oliver got left today.
You finished coloring. So you went for summer? I was like, I looked at him, I was like, should she get credit for this? Did you actually make what people did now?
It was really late.
Are you thinking? No, well, not on Thursday, it was Friday morning. No, stop.
Oh, I could understand the city we were in was
If you will, go ahead and mark your song books, 595. That'll be the song that we sing after Tony gives us the invitation. 595. Now we will sing 870. 870, I am happy today. I'm happy today, oh yes, I'm happy today in Jesus Christ. I'm happy today because He's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm happy today. I'm singing today, oh yes, I'm singing today in Jesus Christ. I'm singing today because He's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm singing today. I'm praying today, oh yes, I'm praying today in Jesus Christ. I'm sharing today because He's taken all my sins away. And that's why I'm sharing today.
Good evening, everyone. If you would, take your Bibles and turn to Acts chapter 5. Acts chapter 5, we'll be there here in just a couple of moments. James, last Wednesday, talked about fear, and it was a good invitation. And then Chuck talked Sunday evening, and I don't want to butcher this up, but, talked about how we should put God, give God the credit in all that we do, and all that we have, and the things that, all the blessings we have in our life, And so I was always told years ago that if you ever wanted to have an argument, there's two things you can talk about: politics and religion. So tonight I'm sort of going to talk about both of them, but it's an interesting thing that fear is something that we actually all try to avoid. We don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're fearful of stuff. So what we do is we surround ourselves and we put ourselves in an area that we call our comfort zone. So once we get in that comfort zone and we're not feeling fearful, we're good. We're at ease. So then we get a little bit deeper into that comfort zone. And then we get a little bit deeper. And then the next thing you know, if you see something that might be fearful, you avoid it. And you do everything in your power to stay away from it. So I'm here, and this is where I want to be. And we never go outside of that. So courage, that's when courage comes in. Courage is something that we need to face that fear. It's like Chuck. Chuck has a fear of heights, and it takes Chuck a lot of courage to climb on top of this building. And I've seen it, but it's no different than, say, me backing off a 110-foot cliff and going down the side of it. The first time I did it, I was a little apprehensive, but I'm at the point now where the only thing I can think about was as soon as I get to the bottom, I got to climb up to the top so I can go off again. But after you conquer these fears, it's not a big thing. And it's sort of like me at work. I've given talks to people, 200, 300, 400 people. And Chuck's been to one of my talks at tournaments, for river safety. It doesn't bother me because I'm very confident and very knowledgeable in what I'm talking about, And here recently I had to go to Bowling Green and do another talk. And I told those people, I said, hey, I can stand up here and talk for an hour if you want to talk about work, because it doesn't bother me. Because I'm very confident and I have that courage about work, and I feel very at ease with it. So it's something that we need to accept and understand that when we have our courage, and we face our fears with that courage, our life will become a little bit better. Your confidence will grow. Your courage will go to places that you'd never dreamed it would go. So I recently, Trey told me a story that she had read in a book, and this was probably a month or so ago. I thought, I'm going to do my imitation on this. So a preacher is preparing his sermon, and while he's preparing his sermon, a gentleman approaches him and says, Andrew Jackson, the President of the United States, will be in attendance while you're giving your sermon. So whatever you do, make sure what you say isn't going to be offensive. So the preacher, he said, okay. So during the sermon, the preacher announces, he says, in case no one notices or hasn't seen him, the president, Andrew Jackson's in attendance. He said, and I've been warned not to say anything that's going to be offensive or to anyone in the crowd, and especially the President of the United States. He said, so with that said, I'm going to tell Andrew Jackson this. Unless Andrew Jackson repents of his sins, he will go to hell. So, when the sermon is over, Andrew Jackson approaches the preacher. And he says, if I could have a regiment of men like you, I could whip anybody in the world. Because of the courage, and for what he said. So with that saying, so if you have the courage, and it's amazing what will happen when you show that courage, the good things that will come from it. So if you have that fear, whether you're approaching someone, let's say that someone you've never, you've been apprehensive to approach about the gospel. If you have that courage, if you have that confidence to approach them, you might be surprised at the outcome of what could happen from it. It's just having that courage. So it reminds me of one of my favorite stories, and it's in Acts 5. And I'm going to read verse 17, 18, 27 and 28, and 40 and 42. In Acts 5, 17 and 18, it says, then the high priest rose up with all those who were with him, which is a sect of the Sadducees, and they were filled with indignation, and laid their hands on the apostles and put them in common prison. In 27 and 28, it says, and when they had brought them, they set them before the council, and the high priest asked them, saying, did we not strictly command you not to teach in this name? And look, if you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine and intend to bring this man's blood on us. So here comes the good stuff, in 40 and 40 through 42. He says, and they agreed with him, and when they had called for the apostles and beaten them, they commanded that they should not speak in the name of Jesus and let them go. So the apostles, they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing they were counted worthy to suffer such shame for his name. And daily in the temple and in every house they did not cease teaching and preaching Jesus as a Christ. That's great courage, knowing, well, we've been thrown in prison, then they beat us, and they've told us, don't be teaching Christ no more. But yet they took that courage and went out and preached. So in Ecclesiastes 12:13, it says, fear God and keep his commandments. And then in Romans 3:23, we covered it tonight. It says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So if you haven't obeyed the gospel, or yet there's something in your life that you need to repent of, think of this. All the Christians that are here tonight, and even those that are not here, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. All. That's, each and every one of us in here. And maybe it's that fear or lack of courage you have, or maybe even pride or not being humble that keeps you from coming forward. But remember, each and every one of us has been in that shoe. We've all had it. We've all been there. We've all done that. So now's the time. So how's your courage? Do you have the courage, or do you let the fear? Because it goes back to the saying, when you show courage, great things will happen. Or things will happen that you'll be, surprised of the reaction. So the reaction for showing that courage, that would be heaven. So that's a good thing. Showing that little bit of courage, setting aside your pride, setting aside your fears. Heaven's the answer. So the invitation is extended to those who have yet to obey the gospel or need the prayers of the congregation. We ask that you come forward while we stand and sing.
Stand up for Jesus, ye soldiers of the cross. Lift high his royal banner, it must not suffer loss. From victory unto victory, his army shall he lead, till every foe is vanquished, and Christ is Lord indeed. Stand up for Jesus, the trumpet call obey, for to the mighty conflict in this his glorious day. Ye that on him now serve him against unnumbered foes. Let courage rise with danger, and strength to strength oppose. Stand up for Jesus, the strife will not be long. This day the noise of battle, the next the victor's song. To him that overcometh, a crown of life shall be. He with the King of glory shall reign eternally. I want to thank Tony for his invitation and Chuck tonight for the class, Study Bible. Does anybody have any announcements, Chuck?
Yeah, Friday night is our monthly Bible class. We had forgotten who volunteered, but just let us know. It'll be 7 o'clock somewhere.
7 o'clock somewhere.
Who'll be out of town?
Morning, Tina out of town. Anyone else? Be out of town, Casons. That's it. We'll have Gene say our closing prayer.
Our Heavenly Father, we are thankful that we were here tonight to study your word, to have this discussion. Heavenly Father, we thank thee for the many blessings which we have in Christ. Heavenly Father, we are thankful for the word that he brought and the time that he spent on this earth, the plan of salvation, and your word that we can read and we can understand that, and if we abide by it and live our lives by it, we can have a good life for the time that we spend here. We're thankful for the group that meets here at River Ridge, and we pray that we will always stand for the truth and have the courage to defend your word and to speak to those that we have opportunities to talk to. As we leave this place, we pray that you will have a safe journey home and be back in the next appointed time. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
No, we're like, I got him Monday morning, so rude.
That's fine, I just wanted.